In this clip, I'm going to be showing you some of the different components that are affecting your pivot table values. So the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out where the actual data source of the pivot's coming from. So to do that, you can just click somewhere inside of the pivot table. So we'll navigate to our pivot table analyze tab. From here, we can select data and change data source. So what this is going to do is it's going to actually drill into the area where the data is coming from. So as you can see, this is a table and it's set as query 1. So this is the exact data source that it's coming from. So if there's multiple queries in your workbook, you can pinpoint where the data is coming from here. Once you find the data source, you may want to drill into it to view if there's additional steps. You can right click on the table, select table and edit query. So if this is not just a static data table and it might be potentially pulling from SQL or something like that, you can drill into it and figure out additional details. So once we select edit, then powerquery opens up. From here, we can see our query and we can see that here's our data table. You can also see that there's some steps on this. So when we're reviewing these steps, it goes in order from start to finish. So here's our original source. As you can see, if we hit the gearbox here, we're able to look at the actual SQL query. So from here, some knowledge we're gaining is this is only for salesperson 1, and where the product ID length is only 2 characters. We can then see some other steps for formatting, inserting another column for the year, and as we can see here, there's a filter being applied. So we have sales year has to be 2008 or 2009. So that's another additional thing we're picking up from viewing the query. So I'm going to close out of here now. And going back to the pivot table, some other things you're going to want to look for is if you select within the pivot table, you can notice that there might be some filters. You can just select within the pivot table somewhere, go to the data tab, and then select clear to remove all filters. So one last thing would be if there are custom calculated fields within the pivot. If you want to be able to view the equations that are being used, what you can do is click somewhere in the pivot table, go back to your pivot table analyze tab, calculations, fields, items, and sets, and then list formulas. So this would be if there are calculated fields within the pivot table, it will then spit out a list of all the different calculated fields with the formula, the field name, and the order. So those are a couple quick things that might be affecting your pivot table and are useful to kind of dig into.